Hey, guys and gals from early college, high school, the MCOM C100 class at Coastline College. Here we go. Let's go over the TV and radio host pioneers of big name news broadcasters and TV news talk show hosts. Grab your handy dandy page here, your sheet, and we'll run through it like they do at the horse races. Okay, here we go. First off, pioneers, Edward R. Murrow, a great news correspondent. He started in radio first before television. And I think I have World War I on the sheet, but that's incorrect. It's World War II. He was over there in London with the bombs and were going off and the attacks from the Germans in London, and very dangerous, but he made live call-ins and actuality reports and things like that. And then he got into television, very well respected, had a show called See It Now, and he used to close the show, "Good night and good luck." He used to have a cigarette in his mouth as well. But the reason why he said that, number one, is because it was during the Cold War with Russia, when there was no guarantee we were going to be around tomorrow. So it was always the good luck. But he was very controversial with the show. He used to dig deep into interviews with politicians and people of such, and a little controversy, bringing up McCarthyism and communism and things like that. Try to dig through people, get them to take off their masks and see what they really were made of. They tried to soften him up later after almost taking him off the air for the controversy. Had a show called Person to Person, which he would be live in the studio. And then they would put cameras out at some big-name actors, actresses, celebrities like Liberace, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Barbra Streisand, the list goes on. And they would put the cameras in their houses, and they would go around showing people, this is my library, this is my pool table, this is my kitchen, that kind of thing. Very lighthearted, one-to-one, and he hated doing it, by the way, Edward R. Murrow. He liked to get hard news. So anyway, but a lot of his style of reporting led to all the big-time news magazine shows on TV later on, like 60 Minutes, 2020, Nightline, Dateline, and the list goes on. Another pioneer newscaster, the great Walter Cronkite. CBS Evening News for many decades. He reported on big-time stories like the John Kennedy assassination, the first man on the moon, the Vietnam War, presidential debates, you name it. Walter Cronkite was around for many years. He passed away years ago, though. But very well liked and highly rated on television. Walter Cronkite, CBS Evening News. Barbara Walters, first female pioneer newscaster, made a lot of waves. She was did some news on the Today Show on NBC first and made her marks and cut her teeth, if you will. Hosted a news magazine show called 2020. She had a really cool show. The show was called An Evening with Barbara Walters. This show aired immediately after the Academy Awards, and it was highly rated because she would interview some of the big-time actors, actresses, and directors, producers that were up for Academy Awards, either as a nominee or if they won the award. So it was pre-recorded, and it was a really good show, and it was highly rated. And then later on, of course, she produced and directed the daytime show, The View. So Barbara Walters. Don Garraway, NBC Today Show founder and host from 1952 1961. Chet Huntley, David Brinkley. They were the competitor to Walter Cronkite on CBS, the host of their news hour called the Brinkley-Huntley Report from 1956 to 1970. Paul Harvey, mainly a radio guy. He did a little TV, but mainly radio, and we talked about him. He had that radio, he gave him a couple minutes. He just did stories, or 5 minutes here and there, called Paul Harvey News and Comment for ABC Radio Networks. Eric Sevareid, great commentator and reporter for CBS for many years, and he worked as a youngster under Edward R. Murrow. I learned from him and worked with him, and so that's Eric Sevareid. ABC News Tonight, World News Tonight, Frank Reynolds, very good anchor for many years. He started with CBS first, and then ABC. He was there for many years after CBS. Peter Jennings, first Canadian-born to be a lead anchor in America. He was the lead anchor at ABC News Tonight, took over for Frank Reynolds for many years. Charles Kuralt. Charles had a show called CBS News Sunday Morning, and also did on-the-road segments that did, along with special reporting for Walter Cronkite. And he kind of sounded like Walter Cronkite, had same kind of vocal delivery. But Charles Kuralt, very well liked, very good. Charles Osgood, another good guy for CBS. He hosted he still does, the Osgood File, both on television and radio. And let's see, Dan Rather, he was a great evening news host for CBS for many decades after Walter Cronkite. A little controversy, he had some commentary issues, made some details on the air without checking his facts about President Bush Jr., George W. Ted Koppel. Ted Koppel, he was the anchor for Nightline, which was a news show immediately after primetime at 11:30 p.m. He was the host of Nightline, Ted Koppel, for 25 years. Did a great job. Harry Reasoner, great journalist for CBS, also worked for ABC. Emmy Award winner. He was a founder of 60 Minutes, one of the founders. There was a handful of people. Controversy, though, with Barbara Walters. He was kind of a chauvinistic, old school guy. He didn't think women should be doing news on television, and she was working with him, and he wasn't happy about it. The old saying, "Hey, girls stay out of the boys' locker room," kind of thing, the boys' club. Also, he found out she made just as much money as him, or maybe she may have made more money than him. That really ticked him off. So, anyway, besides that, good newscaster, good journalist. Hugh Downs, NBC co-host of the Today Show for many years, and game show host for Concentration and other shows. Booth announcer for The Tonight Show with Jack Parr, one of the many hosts of The Tonight Show. Howard K. Smith, ABC journalist. He also worked as a youngster under Edward R. Murrow. Learned from the best. Eric Severide and Howard K. Smith. Jules Bergman, very good writer, very good journalist. He did a lot of special reporting for ABC News, and specifically did a lot of special reporting during the Apollo 11 and Apollo 13 and onto the moon and all the space things, spaceships and Challenger or Space Challenger, things like that. He would do all those special reporting and all the coverage of that. Jules Bergman, very good. Ed Bradley, CBS 60 Minutes, one of the co-hosts for 26 years. First African-American to be highlighted on the Big Time Show. And he's also would do some work on CBS Sunday Night News as well as an anchor. Tom Brokaw, he was the anchor for the NBC Nightly News for 22 years. He took over for John Chancellor, very well liked for NBC. He had a little controversy. I don't have it written in the notes, but I think it was last year that another sexual allegation, but he was proved innocent. So, Jessica Savage, a brilliant correspondent and a great news anchor. She did some fill-ins during the week, but mainly a weekend news anchor. Fantastic, but controversial. There was possible drug addiction, and she was hard to work with. They said on the set, always creating problems, during commercial breaks and before they go on the air. Terrible, but great on the air. And unfortunately, she died very young. She was got into a car accident. There was a movie, I think, based on her life with actors playing. They changed the name to protect the innocent. I believe it was Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert Redford. Forgot the name of the movie, but I think it was based on Jessica Savage. Connie Chung, first Asian American to be a lead anchor and a star on the news circuit. She started doing local news in some smaller and medium markets and made it to Los Angeles, and then she made it to the networks. Married to Maury Povich, who was a news anchor, and of course he's got the talk show host, which will he has the talk show, and we'll talk about his show in a second. Geraldo Rivera, big-time Latin American star, Puerto Rican born, actually born in New York, I believe, but Puerto Rican heritage. A lot of stuff. ABC, he was a young man, he was a reporter and correspondent, had his own talk show host for many years, used to interview controversial people and topics, and then he's now a contributor on The Five on Fox News. Mike Wallace, one of the founders of 60 Minutes and the original host, and he was a great journalist and media personality. His son, Chris Wallace, does some work for Fox News. Roger Mudd, a very good reporter, did some fill-in work for Walter Cronkite. Tim Russert, John Chancellor, he was a big-time anchor for NBC Nightly News. By the way, Meet the Press, which was a big-time show, just backing up a little bit, Tim Russert was the host for that great show. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, and he was a correspondent for NBC News as well. Now going forward, John Chancellor, big-time lead anchor for NBC Nightly News for 12 years, took over for Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. Brett Hume, Max Robinson, first African-American co-anchor for the ABC World News Tonight. Katie Couric does a great job, great newscaster, but not a really nice lady. If you want to ask me about it later in person, I'll tell you. Anyway, Katie Couric, though. Diane Sawyer, very, very good journalist and reporter. She was on Good Morning America for a handful of years in a show called Prime Time. And she also was a staff member for President Richard Nixon as well. And I believe she was married to a big-time director, Mike Nichols. Yeah, she was married to Mike Nichols, who Academy Award winner, did a lot of big-time shows. Nonetheless, moving on, Jane Pauley, same kind of rhythm as Diane Sawyer, very well liked, did a lot of good stuff. She came out years ago with a book. She struggles with bipolar disorder. Charlie Rose, great talk show host, and he worked for PBS for many years and CBS, and unfortunately one of the many few that got controversial with the sexual assault allegations and things like that. Let's see, moving on. Did I get, here we go, third page. Andy Rooney, CBS, he was on 60 Minutes. He did special commentary and did some funny writing. He was kind of the lighthearted, funny stories on 60 Minutes. Andy Rooney. Morley Safer, another co-host of 60 Minutes and a journalist for CBS News. Louis Ruckhiser, of course, a financial news journalist expert. He worked for PBS and had this show called Wall Street with Louis Rookheiser. Anything you need to know about finance and banking, he was the guy. Sam Donaldson, he was an anchor and reporter for ABC News and White House correspondent for many years, followed the presidents and other politicians in Washington and things like that. Bryant Gumbel, he started in the sports world. He was a sports reporter and anchor, worked for NFL and NBC, and then later got into news a little bit, and then he worked on the Today Show for 15 years. He was the host on NBC's Today Show, and then later, in his semi-retirement years, he's hosting a show called Real Sports on HBO. Keith Olbermann, he's worked for many networks, both a sports reporter and a political journalist, and an anchor and a host, and sometimes he's a little controversial with his comments on actions in the White House and things like that. He's a real nice guy, but on the air sometimes he can be a little harsh and rash. Matt Lauer, great reporter, great Today Show host, but controversial with the sexual allegations. Okay, so another one of the many 5 or 6 or 10 that they're thrown in the hat there for the sexual assault allegations and things like that. Matt Lauer, besides that, he was great on television, but with this weird lifestyle and just not good. He's been taken off the air. Brian Williams, a great anchor for about 10 years for the NBC Nightly News, but he came out with some weird controversy. I don't have a thing written here, but he came out and said that he was in the middle of some gunfire in Iran or Iraq or something like that, and they said, "Well, wait a minute, check your stories," and it didn't match. It didn't mix well, so they took him off the air for a short time and suspended him. I think he's back on the air, but not full time. He's like a fill-in guy. Bill Curtis, one of my favorite guys, CBS and A&E. He was a morning news host for CBS for many years, an anchor, and then he was a narrator for special projects, including investigative reporting shows that you watch either on A&E and other channels. If you did see the movie, Ron Burgundy, he was one of the actors in that movie, played the anchor that would narrate during the movie that Ron Burgundy is supposed to replace in his future career as that character. Bill Curtis, great guy. David Muir, young and up-and-coming anchor. He's the ABC World News Tonight anchor on ABC. Lester Holt, he's the guy that runs the chair there, the anchor chair on NBC Nightly News. Scott Pelley, he was the CBS Evening News anchor for many years, but now he's not on. I don't know who the new anchor is. I think it might be a bunch of fill-in people, 2 or 3 fill-ins, but he does special reporting now. I don't know, they took him off the air. I think he did a great job. Might have been some politics involved, so to speak. Anyway, notable TV news hosts and reporters that are on the cable outlets. Some of these are great personalities. Some people love them, some people hate them. Tucker Carlson, Anderson Cooper, Sean Hannity, Neil Cavuto, Pierce Morgan, Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper, Chris Matthews, Rachel Maddow, and Don Lemon. And Tucker Carlson calls him Don Lemon. They don't see eye to eye. Okay, then we have Judge Jeanine Pirro. Jeanine Pirro on Fox News. She works weekends, does a little hosting. Excuse me. And some commentary, things like that. And Susie Orman for CNBC mainly does some financial business news reporting. Premium cable TV hosts Bill Maher and John Oliver. Both of them do kind of a comedy. Oliver does a little comedy news, an anchor and he does some comedy lightheartedness of some politics and other things around the world, to be sports and entertainment and things going around different countries. Bill Maher, of course, has a panel of people, both conservative and liberal, and they chit-chat and go on and on about politics and things of that nature in a comic kind of fashion, because Bill Maher is known as being a stand-up comic. Interesting show. If you're a liberal or a conservative or a libertarian, it doesn't matter. It's a pretty entertaining show. He brings out some really cool guests. Popular long-running network news programs: Meet the Press, NBC, Face the Nation, CBS, and ABC News This Week. ABC, obviously. It used to be called This Week with David Brinkley before he passed away, or retired and then passed away. So now it's ABC News This Week. Big news magazine type shows. We talked about 60 Minutes, longest running show and most watched news show since 1967. 60 Minutes, still on the air now. World News Tonight, ABC, 2020 on ABC, and also NBC has Dateline NBC. Top TV news networks besides CBS, NBC, and ABC: Fox News, which has more of a conservative approach. CNN News, a more liberal approach. And the mix of both conservative and liberalism. MSNBC and CNBC has a more liberal approach, and the OAN has a more conservative approach. Hard to find the OAN. Not a lot of the cable outlets carry it. It's called One America News. And I believe their studios are in Orange County somewhere. If Irvine or Newport Beach, something like that. Anyway, OAN, One American News. Turning the page, let's see, notable talk show hosts. Talked about Dave Garroway already. Larry King used to have a little show on CNN. And I'm Larry King. He used to talk like that. This guy was married like 7 times, and he's had like 5 heart attacks or 5 heart surgeries. Still living. He's in his 80s. David Frost. We kind of mentioned him when we were doing some stuff with the Beatles. Him and John Lennon never got along. But he had a really good show there on the BBC, and came to America later, and then he used to host the show and interview big name guests, including Richard Nixon after years after his presidency was over. And they made a major motion picture called Frost and Nixon, directed by Ron Howard. So David Frost. Phil Donahue, popular daytime TV show host. Maury Povich, married to Connie Chung. Tom Snyder. Dick Cavett. All the details about these people. Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, Regis Philbin. Geraldo Rivera, already talked about him. Oprah Winfrey. Jerry Springer. He was known for the trashy tabloid show, people fighting and over affairs and people cheating on each other, things like that. And Jenny Jones, she had a controversial one-time moment on her show called Jenny, with a guest shooting another guest during a segment called Same-Sex Secret Crushes. Guy pulled out a gun and shot this guy. Morton Downey Jr., Trash TV, and Sally Jesse Raphael. Very well known at their stage of popularity. Prominent sports broadcasters: Vin Scully, Jim McKay, ABC Network sports host, as we're talking about sports broadcasters now. ABC Network, he hosted a lot of the Olympics, and there's all the details there. Howard Cosell, Bob Costas, Al Michaels, Marv Albert, Jack Buck, his son Joe Buck, very popular now, doing both the number 1 play-by-play duties for Fox TV, baseball and football. Keith Jackson, Dick Enberg, Chris Berman, Harry Carey, Frank Gifford. There's many other sports broadcasters, but these are kind of the main ones. We could add more, but that's good for now. So there you go. You got that. Follow that. Ingest it. Keep it in your memory, and you'll be in good shape. So we will see you later. Get ready for the final exam. It'll be easy. Remember, matching, multiple choice, a few true and false, but don't panic. Just know this stuff. It's not science, okay? Take care. We'll see you again, and be ready. Ciao for now. Oh, and Merry Christmas.